We have 9 a.m., Mr. President.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I'm going to go ahead and call the April 14th study session of Costa Mesa Sanitary District to order. And may I have a roll call, please?
Director Cheyenne Wright. Here. Director Nicole Wiltshire.
Here.
Secretary Arthur Perry.
Here.
Vice President Robert Uten.
Here.
President Michael Schaefer.
Here as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Public comments. This is a time for anyone in the audience and online that wishes to make comments. Items not on the agenda. Do we have any public comment
No, sir.
requested? Then under items of study board, Scott has requested that item 4 be moved up to the beginning of the study session. So if there's no objection, Scott, we'll go ahead and do that.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to turn this over to Marissa Pareda, who's going to lead us off on this item.
Can we actually have David give his code enforcement officer's report first? Would that be okay? Yes, if we could.
Really messing me up now.
Sorry.
You're fine. Then forget what I said. We're going to do the code enforcement officers.
And then we will do the study
do
after.
number 4?
Good,
Okay.
yes, thank you.
No problem. No problem at all.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, President Schaefer and members of the board. I'm here to present my report for the month of March. This report summarizes major points for 3 ordinance enforcement topics covering scavenging, graffiti, and trash containers enforcement. For the month of March, the CMSD code enforcement officer focused his efforts in patrols in various parts of the community. The goal is to identify and deter incidents of scavenging and residential trash carts left within the public view. In the month of March, the district saw a number of complaints filed with the CMSD code enforcement staff regarding scavenging activity in the city. As with most scavenging complaints, the alleged violations take place in the early morning hours. In order to address this residents' concerns, the code enforcement officer is patrolling the streets by 6:30 a.m. Included below are instances of scavengings that were detected while the officer was investigating specific complaints. In the month of March, I came across 3 throughout the community listed with the addresses in a map. Any questions on that?
Austin Street's a new one. I don't think
I had not either,
any
sir.
activity in that area before.
And it was a Friday, so it's at one of my every other Fridays. But good eye, sir. You know where all your streets are at here.
Gotta make the easiest getaway I can.
We'll move on to trash container enforcement. In the month of March, there were a few customer complaints reported to the district headquarters regarding trash carts in public view. The following is a list of locations where trash cart violations were found and addressed by our courtesy notice process. 166 violation notices were put out last month with the streets listed in the amount of carts on that street that were in public view. Any questions on that?
Yeah, David.
Yes, sir.
How often do you talk to most of those people that have trash cart violations?
Very few want to come out and talk to me. Some other, like the talkers, they'll come out and like that one instance we were talking about earlier. I think it's more personable when you're talking to someone face to face than just leaving a violation notice.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
No cases of graffiti in the month of March, and then the list of locations on the back.
You and I were talking earlier, the one person you talked to in Baker, they were new. I guess I would suggest that if you can figure out that they're brand new, that might be a good time to take the time to talk to them.
And I'm not sure of the process when people move into their new houses.
Yeah.
If they're contacting the district, usually they have trash carts already. But yeah, I think if you're a newer resident coming in, that we used to provide a packet to the new residents with everything that they needed to know about trash carts.
Do we now, Jill?
We're working on a new residential guide right now, so we'll be sending that out soon. If somebody moves in, the only way we would know is if they reach out to us requesting information. And then all of our program information is on the website, and then they'll start getting all the mailers that we're sending out.
So you could tell David who the new people are.
We wouldn't know if a property has, been occupied by a new owner. It would be dependent on them to call us and request information, but once they are living there, they'll start receiving all of our information.
Just another contact and
But-
David is the kind of person that is so personable.
He is.
But it also could be a renter, though, which we wouldn't know. You know.
That's possible, you
Well,
know,
that-
a higher
that-
turnover, you know, with the renter.
Well, we don't get any notification from the county of a change, because since we built through the county, they
Not-
don't notify us of new ownership.
No, because it's billed through APN, and so it stays on that APN on the parcel number, and the new property owner receives the new
Yeah,
bill, but we don't get notification of homes being bought or sold.
that makes perfect sense. I mean, the APN number is gonna be, it's like a car
Right.
license plate.
We do know if there's a new build, because we speak with them over the phone when we set up service, and so we provide all of the information at that point, but otherwise we wouldn't receive notification.
There's an opportunity there this would be massive, I think. I'm not sure how we'd do it, but to contact the real estate community and say, hey, if you sell a house, can you let us know? It's kind of like we talked about with the gardeners picking up and using the organics bin. So there are some opportunities, but I think they might be massive. Okay. It'd be nice.
That'll conclude my report, sir.
So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now we're going to take item number 4, move it up to discussion, the second draft of the solid waste rate study. So
Yes, good morning.
yours again, Marissa.
Yeah, I'll start us off. So staff and MSW consultants presented the draft solid waste rate study along with 2 rate scenarios at the March 24th special meeting. Based on the board's direction, a second draft is being presented today, which includes 2 additional scenarios for your consideration. The staff report also outlines Proposition 218 considerations. Following the presentation, MSW consultants and district staff will be available to answer any questions that you have. And with that, I will turn it over to David Davis, President of MSW Consultants, to walk you through the study and the scenarios.
Muted, David.
Can unmute your mic, David, sorry. Let me see if I can help him.
Can you hear me now?
There you are.
All right, it was on a different screen. So let me see if I can properly share my screen here. So let's see, I think I'm going to switch. So do you see a full slide there?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. Well, good morning, board. As you know, I'm David Davis. We spoke last month on March 24th. And the presentation we have today is very similar to the one that we did last month. So I'm going to go fairly quickly just for the benefit of anybody who was not at the meeting last month, and also just to kind of recap what we spoke about. So basically, we're going to have 4 parts of this presentation. There's the background, the methodology and assumptions, talk about the financial outlook, and I'll kind of slow down when we get to scenarios 3 and 4, because that's going to be the new information that is in this presentation. By way of background, the reason that this study was commissioned is because the Orange County landfill system is essentially doubling their tipping fees over a 3-year period. Right now, they charge about $44 a ton. It's going to go to $67. in July of this year, and then it's going to end up at about $81 on July of 2028. The current rate adjustment plan that was approved at the rate study that the district previously did is shown on this slide, and that includes a scheduled rate increase of 7% this July, followed by another 7%, and then a 5%. So those are the ones that are currently approved. The district has a policy of maintaining a minimum operating reserve of 30%. Previously, the district took an approach of only looking at the cash. And you may recall in this particular study, our approach is to look at the cash and investments together. You've got a significant part of your expenditures is payments to your hauler, and that agreement requires that they get a CPI adjustment every year, but that CPI is maxed out at 5%. And also in your franchise agreement, there's a provision where they've agreed to keep the net to hauler rate within 10% of the Orange County average. So what we did here is we projected out revenues and expenses over a 10-year period. In the report, it shows 5 years, and many of the tables here, I'm going to show you a 5-year, but in the appendix and for the charts that I'm going to show you, it's going to show over a 10-year period. So these projections were based on historic and budgeted amounts, and we worked these out in conjunction with district staff. Here's the assumptions that we made: inflation 3%, and this is the same as it was in the presentation last month. And here's the current financial outlook, and this is if you take no action. And I'm going to introduce the particulars of this slide because the format is used further on in the presentation, and then we'll go a little faster. But basically what this shows is over a period of years, the beginning cash and investments balance. So for example, at the end of fiscal 2025, you had this almost $5.9 million in cash and investments in the bank. And when you start fiscal 26 at that balance, there's a projected surplus in fiscal 26. It would bring it up to 6.3. And this kind of daisy chains over the period of time. And then down below, we have the target, which is 30% of your operating expenses. And then finally down here, what this does is this compares the ending cash reserve balance in cash and investments with your target. And what this shows is that as of the end of fiscal 2026, you're projected to have 6.3 million in cash and investments, and your target is approximately 2.8 million. So you'd be over your target by about $3.5 million. So this basically gives you a snapshot of your operating reserve. Now, what's going to happen, because these landfill rate increases are going to go into effect, you're going to go from a place where you've got a surplus to these shortfalls every year. And because you've got, at the moment, you have a pretty healthy operating reserve balance, that gets depleted over time so that by the end of the 5 years, you're almost completely out of cash and investments if only the rate adjustments that are approved go into effect. And then even before that, you'll be below your target balance in fiscal 2030. And I want to explain this also because you'll see this format. The green bars is your revenue, the brown is your expenses, and the blue line is the balance in your cash and investments, and this yellow line is your 30% operating target. And what this shows is under the current situation, in 2027, you're going to start to run this shortfall, right? So when the brown bar exceeds the green bar, that means you're going to have a shortfall, as opposed to here, the landfill rates haven't kicked in yet, so you're running a surplus. This is where the landfill rates increase and keep increasing. And you notice that the green bar is going to go up for a couple years, but then it levels off here because there's no more approved rate increases after this period of time. But your expenses are going to keep growing over time due to the 5% increase on the hauler tipping fee, and the landfills are going to go up about 3%. So this is the format that we're going to use in looking at all these scenarios. And what this chart represents is if you only allow the currently approved rate adjustments to go into effect. So now I'm going to talk about these 4 scenarios. And these are the same. The scenarios 1 or 2 are the same that were presented last meeting. And in scenario 1, what we tried to do is keep the currently approved rate adjustments as long as we could before we had to start making further adjustments. And you may notice, because we can maintain those at the beginning, we have to make up for that towards the end of this scenario. So what that looks like in the shortfall and surplus is we were going to allow a shortfall for these years because we could absorb it over a period of time. And what this basically does is it uses the current balance, the current healthy balance in your operating reserves to absorb some of these rate adjustments where you have a shortfall. And you can see down here, the cash, I mean, you're starting out the 5.9. At the end of this year, you're going to be at 6.3. But then when this landfill tipping fee increases, it's going to start to make these amounts go down. You use 6 million here, 5.6, about 5 million, 4.4, 4.2. So you're, and under this scenario, you're keeping the target. Your cash reserves are above the target, but you're depleting your operating reserve. And what that looks like is this. So you've got this healthy reserve, but because you've got these shortfalls here where the brown line is exceeding the green line, it depletes the operating reserve. But then we kind of catch up towards the end here, and then we start matching the operating reserve. And I guess I want to remind us that the 30% operating reserve is a minimum. So there's no requirement that you match that necessarily. It's only that you don't go below that. And then in scenario 2, the rate increases are slightly higher at the beginning. Instead of 7, we go 8%. And, you know, in utility rate making, it's important to remember that small changes at the beginning of a planning period will end up to have a big impact later on. So this is where we tried to keep the rates a little bit more stable than the previous rate adjustment, where we can have a little bit higher increases at the beginning of this 5-year period, but we don't have like the 11% that we had in scenario 1. And the impact that that has on the cash is that the cash, it does go down. So we do have shortfalls, but we still maintain a healthy amount of money above our target balance. And this is kind of, as you recall, the board's discussion was, well, you know, we really don't like this shortfall, right? We don't like sending out more money than we're taking in. So as a result of that, we've put another couple of scenarios together. But before I leave that, let me just show you. This is kind of similar to the last graph where we would deplete, although it's just a little bit slower depletion of the operating cash and reserves. So this is going to look very similar to scenario 1 in the shape of the graph. And I'm going to show all 4 of these on one page in a minute here. So now in scenario 3, we said, okay, let's increase the rates. So instead of the 7 or the 8% early on, let's do some 9%. And even though we may have some really slight shortfalls, it does do a better job of maintaining the operating reserve balance. So this is where we have a 9, and followed by some 8s. And then let me show you what that does to the cash. So instead of these pretty significant shortfalls, we do have some shortfalls, but they're not as much. And in scenario 4, we're going to have no shortfalls. But here, as kind of an option between scenario 2 and scenario 4, we're showing some kind of slight shortfalls, right? Because I'm trying to think of, anyway, the overall revenue, I want to say, well, I can look at the graph here. Let me just look at this. So out of having revenue of about, 12 or $13 million, having a shortfall of 100,000 or 50, that's a pretty small amount of shortfall. It looks like a lot of money. $100,000 is a lot of money, but when you compare it to the total amount of revenue, which is right here between 12 and 13 million, it's not as much. It's almost break even. But let me show you scenario 4. The rate increases are even higher, right? These are probably the highest rate increases of all the scenarios at the front end. We're starting off with, instead of this July having a 7% increase, you would have an 11% increase, followed by an 8 and some kind of 8% adjustments here. And then what that would look like on the cash is, and the surplus is, we would not have a shortfall at all. We would always have more revenue coming in than we had expenses going out. And then what that would do to the balance in the cash and investments is it would preserve that balance, right? You can see you got 6.3, 6.4, 6.4. So this is pretty flat going across the initial 5 years. And then you can see down here, the amount, you're still well over your target. And then what that looks like in our graph is this is where you're maintaining that level balance in your operating cash and reserve. And then you can see here, in all cases, the green line is above the brown line, and you've got surpluses out into the future. So what we thought would be kind of handy is to put all of these charts on one page so that we could kind of compare them all in one glance. And across the top here, we have scenarios 1 and 2, and you can see they're kind of similar, where we're having some shortfalls here, and that's causing the operating reserve to kind of decrease to, it gets to the point where it meets the target, and then we have it so that it just meets the target, right? So that's kind of the minimum requirement that you have. You're meeting your 30%. And then in scenarios 3 and 4, also kind of similar, but you can see this one, it just swoons just a little bit because there are some slight shortfalls in this period of time here. Like you can see, this brown line is higher than the green line. And then in scenario 4, this is where we're making the rate increases such that you do not have any shortfalls. So in all cases, the green line is above the brown line, and you're also well above your target. And then just to put all the rate adjustments kind of on the same page, scenario 1, this is where we try and maintain that 7% for the first couple of years. But then because we had the lower 7%, we kind of have to make up for it at the back end. And then we can kind of tap on the brakes here a little bit after 2033. And then scenario 2, it makes the graph, the previous graph, kind of similar, but instead of a 7%, we start off with 8%. We do a little bump here, but this is a lot smoother over time than scenario 1. And then these are your new scenarios. And what this shows is that in order to kind of get a smoother rate adjustment over time, the trade-off there is we're going to have some shortfalls during this period, but we are able to keep the rate adjustments more stable over time. And then finally, in order to keep the always have a surplus, we need to do this 11% initially. Then we can back off, and we still have to do some rate increases here. But because we had this big increase at the beginning, that enables us to kind of have lower increases at the tail end. So I hope that's helpful to kind of look at those all on the same graph. But let me just kind of finish the presentation. This is just a summary, basically kind of what I've explained to you. Scenario 1 maintains the currently approved rate increases. Scenario 2, you have some slightly higher increases in the near term, and the trade-off is that you have predictable rates in the longer term. And then for scenario 3, higher increases than scenario 2, fewer shortfalls, and a more stable rate adjustment over time. This one is scenario 4. We always have a surplus, but the trade-off for that is to have the 11% increase this July. And then just to recap on the net to hauler comparisons, these have not changed. What you're going to pay CRNR is always going to be lower than 10% of the Orange County average. And then what we have added to this graph is, here's your current rate. And then these two bars here is scenarios 1 and 2. Scenario 3 puts you a little bit higher towards the max. And here's scenario 4. And this is the rates as of July 1st of 2026. So this is, if you do the scenario 4, your rates are going to be at this end of the scale. If you do scenario 3, you're going to be at this point in the scale. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or go back to any slides that you may have questions about.
Thank you, David. I have a question for you. Are you running for governor?
Yes. Yes. I'm going to be an independent. See if I can take a.
But looking at your screenshot, you look like all the commercials with your flag in the back. You're all dressed up. So good luck with the other 6 candidates. Anyway, enough frivolity. Questions for David? Anybody?
Good presentation.
Yeah, excellent. Excellent.
Thank you.
Somehow I think we're going to have to present this to the to our constituents. And what I would like to show is, and I haven't looked at the 10-year outlooks for any of the scenarios, but I'd like to show that, we already have in place about a 7% increase out for the present 5-year rate increases. I'm in favor of either scenario 3 or 4. And I think that because I think the assumptions are fiscally conservative, that blue line won't come down as far as it does. I believe the assumptions are fiscally conservative. So we're going to get more revenue and the expenses aren't going to be as high. The revenue might be the same, but the expenses aren't going to be as high. As the study needs to be fiscally conservative. So I think we need to maintain that those reserves because we had no clue that county's going to do to us what they did, and there will be things that might pop up that do the same amount of harm to our expenses. Anyway.
Do we know that there's going to be another 5-year increase after the first 5 years? Or do we know that yet?
From the county, you're saying?
Yeah, from the county.
No, I don't. But we should anticipate there will be increases past the 3 to 4 years that we implement the WISE agreement. So yes, I would anticipate increase. How much that is, we don't know. That'll be negotiated between the county officials and probably the City Managers Association.
Find that out probably 5 years.
Probably 3 or 4 years, correct. Yeah.
I mean, let's be realistic here. We're going to see a rate increase in 5 years. The landfill situation is not getting any better. In fact, it's getting worse, and it's going to trend to getting worse until people get organics and everything, compost, until that has a major impact on people. We're going to see tipping fees continue to go up. So I think we need to anticipate that.
Yeah, I was looking at both of the 2 I like is either 2 or 3. That's what I listed based on what Bob had said also, but keeping a flat rate of 8% makes sense to a homeowner. They can apply, so 2 or 3 would be my choice.
Which,
If I could interject, I'd like to make one other point is that when you set these rates, you're going to set rates for 5 years under Prop 218. And that's the most that you can get approved all at once before you have to do another 45-day majority protest. And the rates that you approve under Prop 218 are the maximum rates. So if, for example, you set rates and circumstances are more favorable than you expected, then you could come back in the year 1, year 2, year 3, or any of those first 5 years, and you can tap on the brakes. So for example, if you approve today an 8% rate increase 3 years from now, and then it turns out that you really don't need that, you have the flexibility to implement something less without going through the Prop 218. So the Prop 218, you're authorized what the maximum rates are going to be. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yes.
I have thoughts as well. I thank you for turning these two new scenarios out. This is definitely what I was looking for. And I think after reading a little more about Prop 218, I think I'm leaning scenario 3. And the reason that is because we are over target. So I don't think we need to worry as much about breaking even, say if we were right at target, for example, then we'd want to be more cautious of that. I'm a little nervous that by the end of the 5 years, scenario 2 only leaves a little over $500,000. So if any variables were to change, we would have to change our rates at the 5 year, whereas at the end of the 5 years in scenario 3, we still have over 1.5 million. And I'm envisioning, as we've discussed in the past, more programs with the reserve funds as well. So I do want to leave like a comfortable buffer for education, because that's also part of our requirements for SB 1383. And I feel like we've gone through a significant transition with our services, going from we just pick up trash to we now have 3-cart system with compliance, and we're trying to change behavior. Like, this is a very big shift culturally that we want to basically lead our customers through. So I think scenario 3 is like this perfect Goldilocks, right? Where we're increasing in a reasonable rate of what our expenses are, but we're allowing for margin to supplement slowly over the 5 years, where it's not going to force our hand at the end of the 5 years. And we'll also have some money to invest in other programs rather than putting it full on into the rate increase. So yeah, that's what I'm leaning towards. And I might have questions about Prop 218 actually. By reading it by definition, it feels like this is all pretty compliant, David, right? Like we're basically, all of these are just increasing to meet the cost of the service.
That's correct.
And I mean, we're like one of the most financially transparent districts, right? We win awards for it. And I'm assuming we already have a plan that we wrote up when we knew we were going to go over the surplus, or when we knew we were going to build a surplus over our target amount. Do we have a plan that we wrote up in the past, or have we just not needed it?
We don't have a plan, and that's something that we noted in the staff report. The recommendation is if we did select scenarios 3 or 4, is that the board would want to sooner rather than later develop a plan to use those reserves.
Can we just use staff time for that, or would we have to do a consultant?
That's fine.
Great. I would love that. And I feel like we've already been discussing that as well. So, and also, isn't that kind of the purpose of some of the grant funding we received, is to start testing out education initiatives like the Discovery Cube program and stuff? Okay, cool.
Some questions.
Yeah, that might be my questions for now. I'll circle back if anything else comes up.
Mr. President,
Could I just interject that, and with respect to David, the way you set Prop 218 rates is you develop your cost of service, the program you're trying to put in place, and then you set what's the proportional cost to the different ratepayers for that service. So we wouldn't want to just create more money and then figure a way to spend it later. The courts wouldn't view that very favorably. They want to see what are you trying to accomplish, and then they want to divide it and spread it amongst the people in a fair way. And they don't like neat, tidy numbers, that looks like you just pick 10%. You just want to give yourself a 10% raise. They would more like it if you divided the numbers up and it comes out to some kind of a fraction. And that's what you're seeing in some of the cases. So this is just not to say an equal number isn't going to pass muster, but it's just what some of the courts are picking up on now, that, neat and tidy percentages and things like that is not what they want to see. And the cost of services, you establish what you're trying to accomplish, and then you spread it after that. So I just didn't want to let the conversation go off on, we'll figure a way to spend money later.
Yeah.
That's really not the way you approach it, and we don't want that in the record.
So, David, with Alan's comments, do any of the scenarios get to what he's talking about being one of these where we'll figure out a way to spend it? Or do they all kind of conform to what 218 requires?
Well, I think 218 requires that there's a nexus between the rates that's charged and the cost of service. And I think in the district's case, it's probably the most simple, right? Because there's just basically one rate to represent that nexus. And I guess I'm not an attorney, but where I guess it may take some consideration is, building the reserve. Like, for example, if we wanted to build the reserve to be 20 million, would that be, represent the cost of service? I think this does represent the nexus between the rates that's charged and the cost of service. The degree to which the district maintains or builds its reserve, I think that's, and I assume that was your legal counsel speaking there. I think that would be a question for that person. Does that make sense? I don't know if that was helpful, but.
My understanding is we're actually discussing the opposite, which is how much are we willing to supplement the cost to the ratepayers out of reserves we already have. None of these scenarios give us a profit, right? None of these scenarios are we making more money than we'll have to spend. Only scenario 4 is saying, hey, we have enough reserve now, so let's just keep breaking even at our costs and keep the reserve at what it's at, other than the interest rate from investments or whatever. And then the debate between scenario 1 to 3 is, at what degree are we willing to supplement the costs to the point of how it would affect our target dollar amount in our fund, right? And so that's where I'm saying, okay, I think the comfort level should be supplementing a little bit, but not over leveraging to the point where we then are just at target or below target. So that's why I'm not, from the definition of 218, I think we're just raising it as much as we have to and contemplating raising it less and just.
Yeah, and I think with scenario 3, you can demonstrate that the revenues are actually less than the expenses. It's less than your cost of service on a year-to-year basis. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes, yeah.
Hopefully I'm not speaking for everybody, but am I getting the sense that scenario 1 and 4 are really off the table?
Yeah, I would say so. I think it's either 2.
Anybody disagree with that statement? So we're really looking at 2 or 3. From my personal opinion, I could live with either one of them. I think with scenario 2, I'm still more in line with scenario 2 because of the one statement that says resulting in more stable and predictable rates. I think our constituents would be willing to give up some of the things we're talking about in terms of reserve if they know that their rates are going to be stable. And in this economy, I'm not sure how we stretch stable, but to me, the stable and predictable part of it has a lot of bearing with me. To me, that says to me what I think our constituents would be more in favor of.
I'm in favor of scenario 3, and it shows a larger increase initially, and that is justified because of the county actions. So and then the rates are pretty stable thereafter.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the table comparison. So scenario 2 is 8% across the board. Scenario 3 is 99888. Very small. I mean, I think it's good that we're coming to like the middle ground ones. I think what I'm compelled by though is that a small change to each customer actually makes a really big difference to us and how it impacts our reserves. So the good news is if we decide on scenario 2, it's really not that different. But I still think I'm leaning scenario 3, to be honest. David, can you speak to any other differences between the two scenarios to help us maybe debate further here?
You know, it's really kind of a policy thing, right? I think I think that, well, I really am reluctant to give an opinion, but I come back to this idea that in a couple years you can take another look at this, right? And if it turns out, like if you do 11%, that's a lot, right? And you've got a landfill like jurisdictions all over Orange County are going to be doing some significant increases. And it's from a optics point of view, we had a 7%, but now the landfill rate is going to double. So now we're going to have to go to 11%. That's a pretty easy sell. And then you start generating additional revenue, the rates go down to the 8. But if it turns out you need to only do 7 or something less, you've got the flexibility over the next 5 years. And at the end of 5 years, you're probably going to have to do another rate study anyway, whether you do it in-house or have a consultant, because the 45-day notice and the majority protest only is good for 5 years. And at the end of that 5 years, you're going to have to do another public notice. And most jurisdictions will do a cost of service study before they go through that majority protest process. So I like, at last meeting, the kind of the consensus is we don't want to have those shortfalls, and we don't want to deplete our reserves, because once you build those reserves, if you could imagine the other shoe was on the other foot and you had to build up your reserves and you had to do rate increases that were more in order to recapture your reserves, like if you were below your target. So I like scenarios 3 and 4 because they protect something good that you already have.
Yeah.
And then I see scenario 3 seems to be kind of stable over time. So I really want to let the policymakers set the policy, but scenario 3 does appeal to me.
Can I know more about what would it look like if we approved scenario 3, but then decided not to reach the maximum? At what point do those types of decisions get made? Is it after the fiscal year and then we go from there? Has that ever happened before?
I would say after a couple of years. So, you're going to come out with your ACFR probably in December of 26, and that's going to show where your cash and investments balance was as of June 30th. So probably in the spring of 27, you can just take a thumbnail sketch, right? You'll know what your cash was and your investments were as of June 30th of 2026. And you can compare it to this study, right? And, you know, we've estimated what it's going to be, but it's going to be different, right? Just because circumstances change and, you know, we don't have a crystal ball, but we do the best we can. So and to be honest, I have jurisdictions that have me take a quick look at it, you know, without the full blown rate study, but just come in and update the model based on the actual and see where they are every year, so they don't get surprised at the end of 5 years. Or yeah, I've got a jurisdiction now where they had to do really some significant rate increases, and they want to know, hey, do we really need to do all these rate increases that we approved, or can we tap on the brakes? So I would do something. You don't have to do the full blown hire a consultant, right? I mean, we've built a model, and I think your staff is very familiar with the model. They really rolled up their sleeves and got into this with us. And you know, if you wanted it every spring, just update that model. And that way, like in July of 2027, you could say, okay, well, man, we had even more cash or less cash, and we do need to do the rate increase, or maybe things got more favorable and we don't. So for example, we have one of our assumptions is that CR&R, their rate increases max out at 5%. Well, inflation's been 3%. And if inflation stays 3%, then you've got a little like a 2% buffer there, because we've assumed that we're going to max out on the CR&R adjustment. So I guess that's a long answer to say I would look at this every year, just as kind of a thumbnail sketch.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest difference to me between the two is that it's a difference of $1 million when we're talking about the target after the 5 years. And knowing that any costs could change, we could get another increase. Since this is the WISE agreement's only 3 years, is that what you said?
The increases are 3 years, then it goes up by the a certain index. It's not the CPI. It's an index that goes up slightly higher than the CPI. I think it's called garbage and trash, and it's an index that's specifically geared towards the solid waste industry.
The WISE agreement's 10 years, but we've approved 4 years of tipping fees for the first 4 years. So we'll have to go back to the table and negotiate the remaining 6 years, what those rates are going to be.
Wow. And knowing that we don't have to max out what we approve, that's kind of comforting to me too. For going with like the more aggressive path.
But we've never done that.
But we've never done that, yeah. And I saw you say that.
But we've always had that opportunity. And we started off with a certain amount of reserves, and those were what were forecasted to be needed at some point in time. And I hear staff say, you know, we didn't necessarily have a plan, but we had 1383 to deal with. There was, in the board's mind, some reason to have those reserves at that level. And then I'm for maintaining them so that the county and or whatever costs come along that we don't foresee. And in fact, then we can take a look at choosing a lower rate, which we've never done. There was a reason why we built those reserves up. And now we're talking about each scenario giving up some of those reserves over a period of time, which means, you know, the money's less valuable 5 years out from now, and we have even less reserves.
Yeah.
In each of these scenarios.
I think it's a good point he made of like, it's going to be harder to build it back up than it is to take it out.
I have some remedial questions about finance, because this is out of my wheelhouse and I want to make sure that I understand. I think they're for Scott. What replenishes the reserves? Is it the revenue that we're taking in right now for services?
Usually it's balances, whatever balances we have at the end of the year, we'll replenish reserves.
Okay. And can we spend, I know that we have to, we can't keep more than a certain amount of reserves, but what is, am I right about that?
You can,
But
you
it's-
can. So the board policy is 30%. If you want to go higher, you can. But what staff is recommending to the board is that we should have a plan on how to spend that money. The 30%, we have a plan, and that was to pay for our bills. Because, the majority of our revenues comes from assessment fees from the county. And it only comes twice a year, usually in the fall and the spring. So we call what's called this dry period, usually between, January through April. We don't have any revenue coming in other than maybe permitting fees. And that's not enough to pay for our bills. So we dip in those reserves to pay the bills.
Are there rules about specifically like what we can spend the reserves on?
No, as long as it's solid waste related, right? I mean, I can't use wastewater projects to fund solid waste money to fund wastewater. They're enterprise funds. So as long as they're related to solid waste, like if we come back to the plan, we want to do like composting program, home compost program, lockable recycling containers. We talked about that's in our strategic plan to deter scavenging. Those are expensive. We fund it through that reserves. As long as they're all solid waste related, that's fine.
And I think the other thing that Cheyenne mentioned, Director Wright, I think we do need funds to spend more on educating the public, even with 1383, the third cart process. And you in your last Friday memo to the boards have given us costs on the mag,
Agnes, yes,
another $20,000 item.
right.
Well, we may, with the plan that's developed, have many $20,000
Good.
needs.
Good.
I'm in favor of scenario 3. I would make a motion if the
I'll second it. To go with option 3. I'll second it.
Can we add to the motion that we'll make a plan for the reserves?
yeah, I think.
I want to make sure we're in.
Yeah,
Well, we don't want to do that now. We just want to
Separate.
set the rates.
Wouldn't let's get the rates.
Separately, yeah.
And we can do that.
We all are in agreement. We don't need that in the motion. Great.
oh, wait, we haven't had a vote. Oh, we don't take votes today?
No, we do. We have.
I mean,
I-
we make recommendations. to
Is
the-
it
well, this
just
is the
staff
board meeting.
direction?
Don't we have a meeting on Thursday about this too?
We're not.
You need to give us direction, what scenario, then we'll come back later this month and you'll adopt a date for a hearing for public deeds. But what we need to know is what scenario you want us to put on the Prop 218 notice.
I think the recommendation is for you to proceed with option 3 or scenario 3, whatever it's called. And come back for a vote at the April board meeting.
And included in the April board meeting is a rough plan.
Reserve plan.
I would need more time for that. I would like to set a separate study session just for that item.
I think that's a good idea. It's important to.
Yes, we would come back with that. Yes.
All right. So I think you guys have direction. Caitlin, your work's cut out for you. We threw you a curveball. But you can hit the curve, so go for it. All right. Let's go to item 2 then.
Thank you, Mr. President. These are just revised revisions to Administrative Regulation 60 of the Citizen Advisory Committee. These revisions were based on the board's directions on drafting new procedures for appointing CAC members, and that's what the revisions address in the red line and also in the clean version. If you have no comments, no suggestions, we'll proceed with these revisions. And the plan is to come back to the board in the April board meeting with applications for you to consider appointments.
We have the option of just taking, they don't have to apply. We can just say, hey, I want this person to be on the CAC.
I do believe we do suggest them to apply, right? We do. Yeah, they do have to. I would encourage, if you have someone in mind, you encourage them to apply.
That's what we want to.
Yeah, we want them to apply for fairness. Yeah, they
Okay,
wouldn't apply.
Yeah, because all the applications have to be available to the public in
Yes.
the meeting.
I
So
was gonna say there's a public
Yes.
transparency thing. Nolani, you had mentioned that you have a list of who our previous applicants were. Can you disseminate those out to us?
Sure.
I've talked to some people that I know, so I'm going to encourage them to apply, obviously, but I want to see what other members of what else is in the pool, so to speak.
Sure.
You could do that.
So you would like to see all the applications received to date
for our
or your
divisions.
individual districts or divisions?
I need a couple of blank applications. You can include that. Anybody else?
So you're gonna email out all of the applications, the completed applications?
Correct.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
That's
Yeah.
what that's.
I just want to make sure I understood.
I think we ought to consider revising the term limit process. We had term limits until we decided not to have them. I would like the CAC focus to be on our two major categories, wastewater and solid waste. And I would expect the focus to be on what the survey told us the citizens were interested in or not interested in. And see, and the strategic plan. There are, I think, the city uses the advisory committee in a different way than we have. I think they put together advisory committees to study particular issues and then they go away. And I think the city is big enough to be able to have a pool of people interested in all the various facets of the city. I think with only two issues, wastewater and trash, I don't want to see the committee go away because we'd never be able to reconstitute it for a particular issue. And I also want to understand when I read the policy, the president was the city has a liaison person with each committee. And the policy has provision for a liaison committee member, a board member to be a liaison to this particular committee. But I don't know why we don't choose that in December like we do all the other appointments.
If you look at I'm sorry, maybe it's under the handbook. Here it is. The red line version.
Yeah.
There is a provision in there that the president appoint
Yeah.
one member of the board. It says, president shall designate one member of the board to serve 1 year
Right.
as a non-voting liaison. We've just never done that, so to speak.
That's what I'm wondering.
So I think we need to
So
stick with
if
that.
we need to do it,
Absolutely.
then you need to do it.
I will be glad to do it, Mr. Vice President.
Maybe at the time when we do the appointment.
I want to make sure everybody understands also the 11th member, the member at large. That's going to come from, I anticipate that coming from a nomination from the board,
From anyone.
from anyone.
Yeah.
And then we'll vote on that person in general. Everybody got that? Okay. I sense some confusion on that, but I think you guys understood that too, that
Yes.
it'll come from a nomination of the
Right.
board.
But so I submit two, and if the board still gets to approve those two.
Yeah, but we have two each, so
Yeah.
that's only 10. We need one person that we have to appoint from the list, probably.
Yeah, so I and Art put our two in, and the board can say, you get one of them.
Well, and that's the way the city council does it.
Yeah. No,
I'd like to revisit the specific removal process. So here it says Well, what got me thinking at first was it says members serve at the pleasure of the board and may be removed at any time. At first, I was going to say, oh, we should say may be removed at any time by a majority of the board members. But then that kind of made me think, oh, do we really want this to have to be like a board meeting agenda moment? Or do we want to write it in that a CAC member can be removed at any time via a letter from the board or via a meeting with the general manager and the president? Like, one, what are we allowed to do? And two, how formal does it have to be?
Like our own appointees, or if like I have a problem with one of your appointees, like. how's that?
So the way my understanding is at the city is that if a majority of council has an issue with my person, the council could make a motion and vote them down. It's very much this unspoken respect though, that like, if I'm having an issue with my person, then I will meet with them and basically ask them to step down. But I think this is a good time to make sure we make it tight, you know?
Well, I believe that if we're going to select members as a majority, then we need to remove members as a majority.
Yeah.
Just, and that unwritten thing about you talking to one of your appointees, that's got nothing to do with us.
Yeah.
I still think.
That could be the first resort, but the last resort will need to be
Absolutely.
the board. Okay, so we should at least have it say they may be removed at any time by the majority of the board at a meeting. Yeah.
However you can word that.
Yeah, the board can only act in a Brown Act properly noticed session, so
Yeah.
it takes care of itself.
Yeah.
The board can't act in any other way.
And what's the process of putting that on an agenda? Like if I have an issue with a CAC member and I want to put it on an agenda to discuss.
I would.
Well, it would go following policy. So the board president, you would go ask the board president, I want to put this on the agenda. Board president will say yes or no.
I would like to add in the background, for the way we create their work plan is, we have strategic plan, goals, objectives, accomplishments, activities, and programs and issues. And down in the second paragraph, it says typical subjects, maybe wastewater operations, finance, solid waste. I would like to put the emphasis on wastewater operations and solid waste, not necessarily diversion programs, but solid waste topics. In the operation code, I just think they want to be, one, educated, and two, their focus be on advising as a public member, as a person from the public on issues that we have in either the citizen survey or our strategic plan opportunities.
All right. Direction, you guys are set on that?
Oh, I guess I just need one direction and one thing. Vice President Un talked about terms. Did you want to change the terms or do you want to leave it as it is? Right now, it's 2 years. They just renews automatically unless, I think they still have to submit an application. So after, it's 2 years. If they want to continue, they have to submit an application and then it gets approved by the board. Or do you want to just say 2 years, they're done, new applications? What's the process?
Well, let's go back to what Director Uden said about term limits. What are you looking at in term?
I hadn't realized, and that there's nothing in here that told me what the term limits used to be. So you say, Scott, the term limits used to be 2 years?
It is right now. It's 2 years. It's 2 years. And then if when the CAC wants to continue for another 2 years, that person will resubmit an application.
But I think he's advocating a strict, you serve,
2 years and you're done?
no,
Hmm.
2 terms or 4 terms
Yeah.
or 3 terms.
That's what the procedure was before. It was 2 consecutive terms of 2 years.
Without one.
And then they had to sit out one before they could reapply. And then that since changed to every 2 years, and then they could reapply because we were struggling trying to fill the seats. And we had people that genuinely wanted to continue.
You might recall there was a member of the public that made issue with that because the board didn't have term limits, so why should the CAC have term limits? Remember that?
I distinctly
Yeah.
remember that.
Yes, yes.
Let's go back to those.
I would suggest that we consider the
I
previous.
agree.
Two off and then
Two.
Two
Sec-
2-year terms, 1 term off, and then they can reapply.
Yes.
That's fine with me. I could go either way, guys. I'm kind of like,
Anybody?
just, yeah, I could also just not appoint them again if I thought their time was up.
Exactly.
on that one, we're good.
Um,
Item 3.
Item 3, again, it kind of relates to item number 2. We, obviously with the new direction we received from the board on the application process, we had to make some revisions to the handbook, the CAC handbook, which you would see those red line recommendations we are making. So we can also, based on what the comments we made on the regulations, we can make sure that they're consistent with the handbook as well.
I think one of the things I would encourage all of us to do is just get this, move this as quickly as possible. Whatever, if you guys, how it fits your schedule. Let's get this process. And that's not just a recommendation to staff. That's a recommendation to the 5 bodies up here too.
So the plan is to present the first batch of applications to you in April. If you want to also consider appointing in May, we can do that as well. And then there'll be orientation in June with the first meeting beginning in July.
Accomplish that.
That's the plan.
Yes, sounds good.
All right. Anything else from staff? Closing items? A couple of quick things. You'll notice in Nolani's emails this morning that Doug Davert and Catherine Freshley have been reappointed to LAFCO as special district reps because nobody ran against them. So they automatically are considered winners. Okay. And then the other email is, if you were anxiously awaiting the liaison meeting this month, the date has been changed, May 15th. The rationale was City Hall is closed on the 24th. I'm not sure what that had to do with us meeting at the school district office, but
Because their employees are off.
we have gracious employees that come to work on
That's
our
what- yeah,
days
I'm
off.
just saying, but
Why
it's-
can't the
yeah.
city do the same?
That's a question, that's for the question for the board.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Was that in your email today? I haven't looked at it, so it's off this month, going to May
So
24th.
the liaison committee is when?
May 15th.
at 8 a.m.
At NMUSD, yes.
I didn't know that, so that's great.
Anything else from the board?
Is that a Friday? So
It's still a Friday.
Yes, I was wondering when we're going to see the healthcare benefits item
Next month,
next month. So May.
yes.
Same thought. I forgot to bring it up. Thank you for doing that.
So are we still meeting on Thursday about the solid waste?
Oh, yes, I wanted to ask about that too. So I asked Nolani, why didn't I know about this meeting? And I guess it's just the subcommittee,
Yeah,
which is just you two.
Oh, got it.
But there was a lot of good looking stuff in there. So
it'll be on your plate
cool.
very soon. Don't worry.
You guys are just gonna get in the weeds.
Yeah, that's the idea that the solid ad hoc committee will report out to the board, president report out to the board what the ad hoc committee discussed, what direction they gave staff, and then if any items being brought back in the future, the president will let the board know.
Any board member can sit in on the committee, but only 2 can speak.
How did an ad hoc?
It's an ad hoc committee, then it now becomes a board meeting if you have other board members showing up.
But I was confused as well. Same as Nicole. I was like, oh, I guess we have a board meeting. So now we know. But I see that you guys are gonna discuss how frequently and the cadence that you want to meet, so.
We haven't had a real schedule for a while. So I think Bruce and Scott have worked on that part of it,
Cool.
making sure we have a with everything that's coming up, a more scheduled system. Okay. Anything else?
So
Yeah.
when is our next meeting? It
Maybe
is,
March 27th or April.
April 27th.
Do have one more thing, and I want
Great.
this to be public. I'm wishing my wife a happy anniversary today. And I want you all to, she's not listening. I want the record to
On the
reflect that
record.
the president wished his wife a happy anniversary.
oh,
Really recorded.
what year is this?
53.
Wow.
Congratulations.
I was 10 years old when I got married.
4/14, that's a great anniversary.
Yeah, never let me forget when taxes were due, that's for sure.
Oh my gosh.
All right, if there's nothing else, thank you guys
Thank
Thank
you.
for all your patience.